This is Laura Cross of Rebel Seed Films and Entertainment with a podcast from the archives. This Film Insights episode was originally released in January 2014. Today's guest expert is CEO and co-founder of Slated, Duncan Cork. Slated is an online platform and marketplace for film financing and deal-making, connecting a global network of investors, filmmakers, and industry professionals. For filmmakers, Slated is a platform to promote viable films to an engaged audience. For investors and the industry, Slated provides access to qualified filmmakers and leading organizations to facilitate targeted introductions and help discover viable projects. Backed by prominent angel investors in the entertainment and finance communities, Slated has built a passionate management team with experience from major studios, technology, and financing companies. Members include some of the world's most prolific filmmakers and actors from films such as Pulp Fiction, Good Will Hunting, Iron Man, The Kids Are All Right, An Inconvenient Truth, and The Descendants. And today, Duncan is going to share tips and insights on the 2 investor fears that your project must address to acquire financing, how to demonstrate inevitability so your film can attract investors, understanding your entrepreneurial role as a producer, how to ensure your film project garners momentum and financing interest, how to use the Slated.com platform to gain exposure for your project and connect with investors and industry professionals, why you must understand the market value of cast, the biggest misconception equity investors have, how producers can demonstrate return on investment for financiers, and how Slated is helping and how producers can help educate investors that film is a viable asset class. Hey, Duncan. Thanks for coming on the show. We're really excited to have you here.
No problem, Laura. How are you?
I'm doing great today. And I'm curious, before you launched Slated.com, was there a space in the film financing process that you noticed needed to be filled, which inspired you to create your company?
Yes. I felt that it was an extremely inefficient process, mostly based on the fact that the pool of investors that are eligible to make film investments is extremely small. And investors that potentially wanted to put in smaller amounts were really restricted based on the costs associated with film finance.
And when you're talking about smaller amounts, what kind of amounts are you talking?
Well, I would say that anybody that would be interested in putting in, say, anything less than $250,000 into a film that is of a substantial budget would have a lot of legal costs associated with closing the deal, and that is very prohibitive to people that are putting in smaller amounts under $250,000. The cost of capital is very high in that circumstance.
And so how does Slated help people? What exactly is Slated.com? How does the platform work?
We're a platform that connects investors and film industry members with viable film packages. And we're doing this in order to facilitate the conversation between the 2 groups. And the hope is that more introductions would occur, and films that are marketable and viable would have a better chance of achieving financing and potentially finding useful sales contacts or distribution contacts a lot faster than otherwise would happen in a offline world.
So it's a platform that really facilitates introductions between filmmakers and investors and filmmakers and other people in the industry. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. That is correct.
And really, what are the benefits of this online platform for filmmakers, but as well as for investors?
Well, the stage at which we are on our company currently, investors find it very helpful that we filter out a significant amount of projects that are, simply not ready to present to investors, based on the stage of packaging that they are. When investors do come to the platform, they're seeing projects that are at a stage that, demonstrating a certain amount of momentum, that the projects are a relative, certainty that they are going to be made, or, they have some kind of wind in their sails, in order to get there. So that eliminates a lot of noise, and which investors find very intimidating. What also helps is that they could review each of the film profiles and compare the projects based on the strengths of the different packages. Where traditionally film investment pitches are extremely varied and differentiated. The technology also helps facilitate introductions to films that meet the criteria of the investor or the industry member. So, for instance, if the investor is only looking for films with budgets ranging from $1 million to $5 million, and they're only interested in North American drama films, they would tell us through the platform, and we would only send them those kinds of deals. So that, again, the site is set up really to eliminate the noise that's out there, and so that investors can find projects that very easily that they are inspired by, connected to, or otherwise would have a higher probability of investing in.
So you're curating the projects for them, and there are also projects that are vetted. There's more transparency, and there's a privacy element, correct?
Yes, the big objective to creating a viable marketplace is to create an environment in which investors feel safe, and celebrities. We have a lot of very high-profile clients on Slated, but they're signing up to Slated because they do not necessarily want to be inundated with unsolicited materials. So we protect their privacy. We ensure that they have a good journey and a good experience with the films that we do connect them with. And the way that the technology is set up, that there's a certain amount of hierarchy that's associated with the investors that we vet and have relationships with, and their ability to reach out to films and filmmakers that they like. Investors have that kind of privilege, but do not receive many pitches from all of the filmmakers that are on the platform. Yeah,
and of course there's obvious benefits for filmmakers too when it comes to having access to accredited investors and getting their film funded. But there's other benefits.
I would say for the filmmakers, it's more of an exposure, that their projects can be exposed to a professional investment community, and seek inbound inquiries. So it's really just letting the community know that this project is viable, it's ready, and if it is approved, can get in front of those investors. So it's from a filmmaker's perspective, it's really about exposing the film to that community, and from an investor's perspective, it's about access to those particular projects because they're able to contact the filmmakers very easily.
Yeah, it's a great resource. What, do you see a kind of a typical timeline for a film finding funding or some funding through Slated.com?
I wish we did. We're relatively new, so we haven't had enough data in order to state facts. But I would say that we're definitely speeding up the process, and we are providing a lot of good, solid contacts for the filmmakers that are approved onto the platform. So all of that stuff is a way at which the projects can come to life more rapidly than they otherwise could have. Yeah. Because going to sort of coffees and lunches and flying over film festivals all around the world, it takes a lot of time and costs a lot of money. Where we're sort of expediting that process is by aggregating the professional film community and the investment community in one place, and then, like I said, exposing fantastic projects and viable projects to them.
Yeah, so I would assume that it's definitely a truncated timeline there, and people should still be going to the film markets and to the film festivals to meet in person with potential investors.
Yes, I would say that the using Slated is really an augmentation of your offline efforts. It doesn't cost anything to use the platform, and it's really about this using the technology as your sort of hub for communicating to your general audience, and so that everybody would have a resource and a place to access information, or at least the latest information about your film project, in a very presentable, clean format, that we're building so that people can respond to it relatively easily.
Yeah, it's a very cool space. So how do filmmakers get their projects listed on Slated, and what is the criteria?
Well, the first step is to become a member. It is a private community. The membership is free, and applying to have your profile verified to us is also free. So we have a lot of people just signing up to the platform and using it as a professional community. Once they've gone through that process and have listed themselves, and they're sort of fill out a profile with their past experience, they then have the option to list the film onto the platform. We have two different kinds of memberships. One is a verified membership, where you're either invited to the platform through us, or you have two existing verified members to vouch for you. And then if you achieve the verification, film submissions are free. But for unverified members, we charge a small submission fee so that we can properly assess and dedicate the resources to assessing the projects. And what kind of qualifications, how far along in the packaging does the film need to be? Is there a certain budget level, those type of things? Yeah, sure. For documentaries, we look at a budget range of somewhere between $250,000 and $1 to $2 million. The top end of that, we really require the documentary to have some sort of theatrical potential. But you shouldn't really be making documentaries for more than $1 million nowadays anyway. So that's the kind of range that we like to look at. For documentaries, again, we do like to see that a director and producer are attached to the project before listing it to the investors. For narratives, we like to see a budget range of $500,000 to $15 million and over. We also require that the director is attached, as are at least one lead cast member, so that investors can properly kind of assess what the package actually looks like. We also like to see, but this is not a prerequisite, that a sales agent is attached. That those kinds of projects usually get a lot more traction on the platform, as are projects that already have attracted some equity financing. The average film that comes to our platform has already raised maybe a quarter of their budget, and this could either be from a tax credit that they're looking at, or it could be from an equity investor that they've got a relationship with, and then they're looking to raise the rest of the capital. And I'm guessing that you're looking also that it's an established producer attached to the project. Well, we do assess each team that approaches the application process. We like to see established teams, and those are the groups that gain the most notoriety. It really comes down to an execution risk that an investor would take on certain projects. If it's a first-time director, we really make sure that the producers have the experience to, bring that director's first feature work into existence. But earlier teams, the ones that are really first-timers that are going out there and raising money, it's a lot tougher to present a package, to a compelling package to a film investor without at least some substantial notable costs that are coming on board who have also vetted and taken a look at the project. So we really look for indicators that other people are going to base their reputation and name on the promise of what the film could be. So the other reason we have company partners that we work with. So, for example, if a first-time filmmaking team has come through the Sundance Labs or IFP, Film Independent, or the San Francisco Film Society, for example, those are company partners of ours that we look to as tastemakers in the business that are bringing forth fantastic projects, and the first-time teams have been workshopped through that process. So we trust those brands to have done the assessment, for us. So we would approve all of those projects just as a matter of fact. So that's kind of how our verification works.
Right. So it's just really about creating a level of certainty for the project. And just a reminder to all you new producers out there to really seek partnering with an established producer to add value to your project and move it forward. How long does the approval process take? So, when should a filmmaker begin to submit their project to Slated?
Well, the first step is, as I said, becoming a member. So that doesn't take very long. Then it would be about putting the film package on the platform. And when we get a submission, the film submission team is alerted. We do have quite a substantial amount of films that are submitted to us on a monthly basis, and we do review them and hopefully respond within a week's time. Sometimes it takes 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how busy we are. We are a relatively small team, but growing. But the number of applications are starting to increase quite rapidly. So as the membership increases, the more films that we get to take a look at, and that's a real privilege for us. And we're very thankful to have gained this kind of traction in the market. But this does come at a cost for us, because we have to review, spend the time that it takes to review each of these kinds of film projects and look at each of the producers' teams and how, what kind of work that they've done before, and see how the package is actually coming along. And then we would respond hopefully within that a week with either, some pointers as to what we would require for the film to be listed on the platform. We would also potentially pre-approve the film based on if it is a really strong package, or we would decline the film. Some films are just unfortunately not a fit for the market that we're looking to create.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice for filmmakers who do get approved? Are there things that they can do to kind of ensure that their projects are really garnering momentum and financing interest? Like, should they have a poster? Should they have an invitation video or a proof of concept video? Those kinds of things?
I would advise, the site, the way it is set up, it's very clear as to what we require in order to present to the filmmakers. And the ones that have more tend to do better. So it's an encouragement to make sure that your entire crew, principal crew, has actually filled out all of their own profiles, that the cast can potentially sign up and also network on the platform. That's very powerful. So the network itself is really the biggest asset that a filmmaker could add to the platform. Mostly because we know how strong social proof is. So, for example, if a producer had to come to us and they had a great director, the investment community may not know that producer, but once the director signs up, they're going to get a notification because they really like that director. They'll track what that director is doing. And so, once the film is actually approved, then they get notified that, Director X is now, part of this project. So the producer is really in control of that process. And the more that he or she could add to the profile, the better it's going to be, and the more exposure it's going to have within the community that we're building. The other really great things, and tips for filmmakers is once a film is actually approved, it is vital that they continue to update the profile as the film gains momentum. The worst thing that investors can see is a project that just is stale and it doesn't move anywhere. One of the greatest quotes I've heard in the film industry that really describes what filmmakers need to do is demonstrate that their project is an inevitability. That if I'm looking at something, there is no way that this film is not going to get made. And if that inevitability is presented to me in a strong fashion, the decision process is really much more simplified. It is whether I want to get on board this train or whether I don't. And that's an easier decision to make rather than it's me that's going to be making sure that this project gets made. So if investors are in that position, it's a little bit more uncomfortable. So the goal of the filmmaker should always be to present a project and their project as an inevitability, and keep demonstrating the momentum. And through the technology that we've built, it's just about adding additional people, getting them signed up, getting them to share and track and network on the platform with other people, and to make it an entire group effort in order to get the film done and established.
Yeah, I love that quote. So it's really about cultivating those relationships and showing movement and creating a level of certainty and, like you said, inevitability around your project, because investors like to back winners.
Yes.
Right.
And they want to see it. They want to see the films get made.
Yeah.
The biggest risk the first risk that an investor would need to assess is whether a film is going to get made or not. The second risk is really whether people are going to want to see it. But there's enough risk in that first step that you need to really address that right from the get-go. So you want to present something that is going to negate that fear in an investor's mind, that they don't want to be first money in to a project just so that the project can move forward. They want to feel that this project is moving forward with or without them, so they're in a better position. And then it really comes down to a question of, will people go and see this? Will it sell in the market? And will this get to a theater near me?
Mm-hmm. So that's why it's good to come in with 25% of the funding already in place, which kind of helps a little bit with fear number one. Will it get made?
Yeah. I mean, it depends. That's a big it's a big aspect. So demonstrating viability has a lot to do with, I'm not the only person at the table here. Mm-hmm. Seeing that other people are putting up equity, it demonstrates the confidence that investors need, that other people have vetted this, and depending on the experience of the investor or the industry professional that is reviewing these projects, they need to see that the amount of comfort that one would get from a much more established and film that has gathered this kind of great momentum, the better it's going to be for them.
Yeah. Do you have any success stories to share around films that were part of Slated.com that have been funded or are actually out there now?
Sure. We had a few really great success stories. I mean, there was one film that was posted onto our platform recently. It was a Nicolas Cage film that is just about to go into production. They found about $250,000 within a week of posting. That was really exciting for us to see that the technology just worked that quickly. Others, obviously it was Nicolas Cage, so others would, without that kind of cost cachet would take a little bit longer. But, there's a phenomenal documentary called Sunshine Superman, which is about the origins of base jumping. It's an Alex Gibney executive-produced project that has been on our platform for, about six months to a year now. And the director has been phenomenal in updating the network consistently. And, she raised the rest of her money that she required to close that film, through Slated and a couple of other investors. And that was just great to see that we were part of that entire journey. So those are examples of how the site can work extremely effectively. Or, some would take a little bit more time, but would achieve that goal nonetheless. Whereas, the Alex Gibney documentary was exposed to investors that were tracking the project and tracking Alex and tracking their director, and the network was kept updating, and investors joined when they felt comfortable that the risk was mitigated. And that sometimes that takes a little bit of time. So it was just great to see the perseverance that director had, Maura Strauss, that's behind this project, and I think it's going to be a phenomenal documentary. Other examples that we've had, some people have just actually networked on the platform and have raised money, which has been great. We had one producer that just met an investor on the platform by connecting, and they talked about a project that wasn't listed on Slated, and they managed to raise I think it was $250,000 as well, just from that one conversation.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah, and that wasn't now the film is on the platform, and the filmmaker continues to have additional conversations, but we understand and respect that it's an entire process, and being on the platform as a member can sometimes be just as powerful as being on the platform with an approved film that is ready to pitch to the rest of the network.
So I was going to ask you about access. Are there ways that filmmakers are using Slated other than just for financing? Like, are they connecting with sales agents? Are they connecting with other pieces for their project?
Yes. A lot of the activity that happens on the platform is pure business networking. So, we've seen lawyers get involved, very high-profile lawyers get involved in fantastic projects. We've seen post-production companies sign up to do post. We've seen sales agents jump on board to a project that they're excited to represent. So there's a lot of activity that happens at that level. And, we constantly encourage filmmakers to not look at Slated as just a source of financing. This is an approved Slated film has some cachet now in the film industry, because, the ones that do go on to complete financing seem to have a fantastic life. We've had, I think that there are 3 films that are up for a Gotham Award this year. I think that there are another 3 different ones that are nominated for an Independent Spirit Award. And, we have countless amounts of members that are, in both and of those kinds of awards that are attached to projects that aren't listed on Slated, but people are networking within that kind of world, and that's important. So even a first-time producer could meet, a high-profile member that has produced something and could help executive produce their next film. So, we've got that kind of powerful network that can help. It all just is a matter of persistence and respecting the community and tracking the people that you really think could add value. By reviewing everybody, reviewing the member list, reading the materials that we're sending out, so that people can track and connect with other individuals that can add value to your project and your career.
Yeah, so that networking aspect is an extremely valuable opportunity. Also, I noticed on the site, and I've been getting your emails and your articles for a while, so even if you're not a member, you have access to these. You have a wonderful series of articles that you call Filmonomics, where you talk about thinking in casts, thinking in genres, thinking in budgets, and you talk about the need for filmmakers to really think like entrepreneurs. What do you think filmmakers need to know about embracing an entrepreneurial mindset?
Well, I think that the most important aspect of embracing that mindset is an understanding that it is not your role as a producer doesn't end when the film's in the can. You need to really understand that as a producer and a filmmaker, you have a relationship with this property that is going to last 5-10 years, and that if you are in charge of or have a relationship with it, the responsibility to this entire process, it's a long-term relationship that you have with the property that you're creating. What we've seen in the past is really more of a sort of waterfall mindset that producers have, where they are so completely focused on getting the film in the can that once it happens, they pass it on to sales agents, and then it's almost just, they forget about it and move on to their next project. The responsibility of an independent filmmaker is to realize that the relationships that they've built, especially with their investors, needs to be nurtured over a longer period of time. And, there's a certain amount of care and effort that you need to take to foster those relationships, because a good relationship with an investor now that is actually, receiving a benefit from being part of this project, will be much more inclined to invest in the future project that you're participating in. Mm-hmm. So those relationships are very important. And if your entire focus is sort of short term, it becomes a very different process to actually get something made. So I encourage everybody to look at this is a career that they're hoping to build, producing films, creating great material out there, and participating within this incredible industry. So it's not to look at the filmmaking process as a one film wonder that you're just going to put out there. This is a long-term relationship that you want to start building with the film industry, and you've got to be very aware of those relationships and how to strengthen those relationships right from the beginning. And that's the job of the entrepreneur. Other aspects are really about keeping your budget as low as humanly possible. You do not want to be spending any more money than you absolutely have to in order to get the film story told. There is no real opportunity to create a sort of luxury in your budget, because the probability of making a return increases almost exponentially the smaller your budget is going to be. As long as you maintain a quality of product, you've got to keep those costs down. And it's important to do that in order to, recoup, at least for your investors, because they're going to feel a lot more confident about then re-upping and putting their money into a new, maybe a bolder project later down the line.
Mm-hmm. While we're on the subject of budget, I'm wondering if these filmmakers are also putting into their budget and attempting to acquire financing for some of their marketing, or are they still just going the traditional route with distributors and relying on the distributors to do all of the marketing, and so they're not getting financing for that?
Yeah, we have a few projects on the platform that are looking for distribution financing. I think that the dream of every producer is to be picked up at a film festival by a distributor, or to find a sales agent that can actually sell their film in foreign territories. The reality is that there are a significant amount of films out there that get made but will never get seen. The hope is that with the new sort of outlets of distribution opportunities, and with really innovative companies like Gravitas or Snag Films, where they're really nurturing content and having a life sort of in a non-traditional distribution sense, people are still requiring some sort of marketing dollars in order to get their film exposed, out there into the audience. So we are seeing small distribution budgets being raised in order to get their film forwarded, say in New York and Los Angeles, or London, or Paris, or wherever it may be, that they're renting the theater in order to gain some buzz and show the film, to get that kind of traction, and then direct that community to spreading the word on social networks and hopefully driving some ancillary revenue through the VOD platforms. So that's a very exciting kind of space to be in, and this is happening more and more as the production costs decrease and distribution opportunities increase. With the technology that's coming up, we're going to see a lot more content, and so those distribution dollars for films that aren't picked up by the bigger distributors are going to need to be raised by the producers. And this comes back to your entrepreneurial question. They've got to really understand that the distribution fees are really about marketing the product and getting that out there. Now, there's only a certain amount of distributors that would have the capital in order to put into marketing and promoting, the P&A costs of the film. But you as a producer would really need to understand that if that opportunity doesn't present itself, your responsibility is really to try and get it out into the market. So to bear that in mind is very important.
Yeah, and if you had it in the budget to begin with, there are opportunities out there for getting larger theatrical distribution through like freestyle releasing like The Illusionist did a few years back. Of course, you have to have the right film to be able to do that, and if you have the budget to get it out there, it can. I think it's a very exciting time that if you're not getting traditional distribution, that there are opportunities to get out there, and not just on the Internet, but through direct distribution, like I said, like through freestyle releasing and a couple other companies that can get you into the theaters on a bigger basis. So,
yeah, I think that the biggest, most exciting part of where we are today in the film industry is that I think for the first time a filmmaker has the means in which they can raise the money that they require to make the production. Using, a donation-based
production
service
budgets have really dropped, and the casting, their fees have dropped. And I was seeing through AFM that there were a lot of talent that were actually acting as equity investors, not just getting points on the back end, but actually being treated like equity investors. And so I think, it's very exciting what you can do with the budgets that you couldn't do, a few years ago.
Well, I'm seeing, filmmakers, use platform donation-based services like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, raise a little bit of that development money. Then they can come and use an equity-based investment platform like Slated, to put together their $500,000 budget. With that, they can then, go to use a service like Tug or Gather, and potentially set up a relationship with VHX or Vimeo's new on-demand service. And, you've really got an opportunity to create a product and a revenue source for your film through the entire value chain, which avoids the industry machine, and that's very interesting. So if you could make a film for $100,000, you can potentially use Tug to forward it with all of the community that you're building through Twitter and Facebook. You could raise the money through that following from everybody doing a donation-based campaign. You then could promote it on VHX or Vimeo in order to gain those sort of the online sales, create your own shop, and there you have it. You have an entire distribution network, a production network, a financing network, all online, and that's never happened before. So that's what I find very exciting about the technology solutions that are coming up nowadays.
Yeah, just a lot of great opportunities out there. And getting back to investors and equity investment, on your site you also have a 4-part white paper for investors titled Independent Film as a Viable Asset Class. Do you find that most investors are becoming more savvy or more educated about film investment, or are there certain aspects about investing in film that investors really need to have a better understanding about?
Yes and yes. We are seeing that investors are becoming smarter about the questions that they need to ask, which is an important aspect of it. It is not easy to really figure out how films make money. I think that the biggest misconception is that the box office is really related to ROI for an equity film investor. Those two things are so far apart in terms of the value chain. It's very important that equity investors understand that the majority of their recruitment is going to come from right sales, in various territories, domestically and internationally. And, that factor alone changes the investment conversation quite significantly about how marketable is and viable is your product to sell in the market, rather so much than betting on some outlier chance that your film is going to be the next paranormal activity. That happens so rarely that it is much more responsible for a producer to put a plan in place that demonstrates an understanding of how they're going to recoup their money from investors by right sales. So, if investors are smart enough to know to answer those questions and that they can potentially align themselves with and understand who the real players are that exist in that world, it is so much more beneficial for equity investors to get involved in the conversation. Whereas, they're not necessarily financing just an art house project that the filmmaker is selling as a concept, which it becomes a lot less risky when you're associating your investment dollars with viable films that can actually sell in the market. So that's the kind of stuff that is important to know and understand the value of cost and why it is important. Why Jean-Claude Van Damme can command a higher sale price for your film in the Benelux countries than Jennifer Lawrence can, for example. It's a very fascinating business, and without that kind of information out there, investors really don't understand how they're going to recoup. And if they don't understand, they're not going to invest at all. It's very, very easy for a person to understand how to invest in real estate, how to invest in stocks and bonds. There's so much transparency and clarity as to how that investment is likely to recoup. And if investors really understand the risk and they educate themselves accordingly, it creates a much more sustainable and viable investment class. Mm-hmm. Investors like taking risk. They do take risk all the time. They are very aware of the fact that film is a high-risk asset class. But without the education materials that are required to give them that kind of level of comfort and knowledge and understanding, they're just going to ignore the asset class entirely because they just don't understand it. And that, I think, is the number one complaint that we ever have from any investor that has never invested in film. They come to us and they say, I don't understand film, therefore I'm not going to invest. So categorically, that's the first thing. The unfortunate thing, again, is that Hollywood do not make it easy on investors because the understanding and what the press reports about Hollywood accounting and all of the lawsuits that happen, it doesn't do the industry any favors to constantly promote the negative of what is happening, and the investors really don't understand why the lawsuits are even occurring. So, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So education is a big part of it. It's a big part of what Slated's mission is, to promote a big understanding of film investing. And this is not just for the film investors themselves. It's for film producers, because a lot of film producers that we see really don't understand how to create a marketable, viable film product. And that's an important education on both sides of the table.
Great. So you really see Slated.com as filling that space to help educate investors as well as filmmakers about creating viable projects and about what they need to know about investing in them.
Yes, it's a conduit to a much sort of bigger solution. We also really do appreciate the value of art. It's a constant dialogue between commercial viability and artistic integrity. So that conversation will never not exist in the film industry. It is a creative industry, and we've seen fantastic, risky projects come out of the courage of the investment community that find material that is so compelling that it doesn't sort of fit the standard definition of what a commercially viable film would be, yet it reaches and connects with a very wide audience. So we don't restrict those kinds of projects coming onto Slated. We're very particular about embracing all kinds of motivations for investors. Where we really assess viability is whether the team can actually execute what they're doing, and whether it is realistic within the confines of a market as it is today.
Great. Duncan, this has been really wonderful information, and I have one more question for you. I would love to know what's next for Slated.com and what your vision is for the company.
Sure. That could be the biggest question of all. What's next for us? We're very focused on the exciting things that are happening with the Jobs Act and with what our ability is as a transaction platform to facilitate the deals that can happen. We've seen very big success with the donation-based sites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. Where we see a real place for ourselves in the market is facilitating real equity transactions, so that investors can put significant amounts of money into projects. The average donation on Kickstarter is $50 to $75. The lowest investment we've seen on Slated is $25,000. So it's a very different market. But if we are facilitating those deals, it's going to open up the opportunity for investors to trust the technology and the qualification that we would give on both sides of the table. Filmmakers could trust that we're vetting the investors, for their suitability and KYC checks and anti-money laundering checks. We're setting up escrow facilities so that the investors could feel safe that we're making sure that the filmmakers are raising all of their money, and they're not just writing checks into thin air. So there's a lot more in 2014 that we're building in order to facilitate those deals and allow investors a lot more easy access. From a sort of fiduciary standpoint, we're going to be making sure that the films that we represent are eligible for financing, and facilitate that through the transaction engine that we're going to be building. So that's a very prominent in our next steps. Where we see the company going overall is really becoming the sort of resource for financing and packaging films in the future, and then hopefully expand into other areas of the entertainment industry, like television, for example. That could be a very interesting aspect of what we could bring to the TV industry, that we're packaging these great projects. That's a few years off, but that's the overall vision, is that we're going to become, the sort of financing and packaging company for the entertainment industry.
That's all very exciting. And so some of those services will be rolling out in 2014, or are you still building that infrastructure?
We're building it now, and they will be rolling out in 2014.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Duncan, again, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your insights. Really appreciate your time. This has been very valuable.
It's an absolute pleasure, Laura.